Hello everyone, and welcome back to my channel. So this week's drawing is of roses that I drew on a card that I sent to a friend of mine. So starting off, I worked in a basic sketch of how I wanted the roses to be set up. Typically when you sketch this, you want to sketch very light and make sure that you add where your shadows are going to be and where your highlights are going to be. This will make it easier on you when you're painting. Unfortunately, I forgot to add highlights, which I fixed in the end. And I also tend to press very hard when I'm doing my sketches, so I had to go through with the kneaded eraser in the end and lift up all the very dark lines. Since I was in a little bit of a hurry when I was painting this, I did not stretch it, but went ahead and applied masking fluid to any areas I wanted to prevent from turning the background colors. So working on the background, I tried a new technique and I added some of my paint into little plastic jars that I bought at Hobby Lobby. And then I poured some water into those jars and shook those jars really well. That way the paint would be distributed evenly through the water. I then poured them onto my surface and I used a mop brush to kind of keep things under control so that it won't go too insane. This is very important that you have your areas masked off that you do not want to be the background color, because this is such a very liquid technique that it will bleed all over the place. After I did the first layer, I then tilted the board and then added some extra layers in using just my paintbrush, dipped in some colors, and I went through and made sure that I added just kind of dots here and there, which will bleed out, and then I added a darker color, so I added purple, and this kind of darkens the background and complements the colors very well. I then added a little bit of salt to give it a nice salt glaze effect, and I let that dry completely. Now it's on to the main focal point of this drawing, the roses themselves. So I added a very, very light colored wash as a base tone for these roses, and I created that using opera rose and a purple color, and I mixed those two together and then made it very, very watery and laid that down as a base color. While the roses were still slightly damp, I went in and added shadows to the roses themselves. I like to add shading while the roses are still slightly damp. That way it will actually have a little bit of a natural blending to the shading. So I went in and mixed some purples and some blues together and still a little bit of the opera pink, and went in and added it into the shadow areas. I also pulled out some of the shadows with the original opera rose color. That way it will blend nice and smooth. My parents have always commented that art is a lesson in patience, and that is very much true, especially with drawing roses. So when you're drawing your first layer of shadowing, and I say first layer because I added several layers of shadowing in order to create a nice defined rose. So when you're adding your first layer of shadowing, you want to take your time and be patient. With watercolors, the deepness of color occurs the more layers you add. So the first layer is to give you kind of those mid-tone shadows and to give you even an idea of how dark you need your roses to be in order to achieve the effect you're looking for. So looking at this already, I can tell you that I probably have about 2 more layers of shading to add before it's done. After I applied a glaze of opera rose over my now finished roses, I went through and lightly indicated leaves using the same green that I used for the background. I went through and added a mid-tone layer after the first layer had slightly dried. Once again, I like the way it blends if it's still slightly damp when you apply the next layer. As you might be able to tell, I did not completely cover the first layer that I used on the leaves. That way it kind of gives it more depth and more realism. One of the difficult things that I have always found when I'm working with especially still life objects is adding dimension to the drawing itself. So you see where the roses overlap with one another. That is going to become gradually darker and darker. So I added darker and darker colors. I mixed more and more blue and browns in order to darken the color and create more shadows. Also, as you can see, several of the leaves are behind other leaves. At that point, you will have to go through and make sure that the leading edge of the leaves in front are still a little paler. That way you can go in with darker colors without having to go in with pure black at the very end because you have so much dark around the leaves themselves. To finish up this drawing, I went through and darkened all of the shadow areas, and especially along the table. And I actually added gold ink, but unfortunately I didn't get that on the video. I also added stems to the baby's breath and darkened some of the shadows inside of the rose. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up if you liked it, comment down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Bye!